There's a moment in every soul's journey where something shifts. You can't explain it. You couldn't prove it. But in the stillness, or maybe in the chaos, something happens. A thought you didn't expect. A number that repeats. A glance, a song lyric, a name. A message hidden in plain sight that felt like it was placed there just for you. And for a split second, you knew. This wasn't random. This wasn't just life happening. This was life speaking. You felt it in your chest, not fear, but recognition. Like the wind had leaned in and whispered, "You're not alone." And then, just as quickly, the moment passed. The mind told you to let it go. Coincidence. Your imagination. Nothing to see here. But something inside you couldn't forget, because in that one fragile instant, the veil had lifted, and something deeper, something ancient, looked back at you. What if that wasn't the first time? What if, all along, reality has been brushing against your awareness, softly, subtly, trying not to startle you? The question is not, have you seen the signs? The question is, have you ever dared to trust them? Keep listening, because later we'll explore what those signs actually mean and why they often appear when you're standing at the edge of something you can't yet name. You see, most people dismiss these moments as noise. They're taught to trust only what can be measured, verified, or explained. But the universe doesn't speak in proofs. It speaks in patterns, and every so often, it breaks its silence. In the middle of heartbreak, at the edge of surrender, or in the most ordinary hour of the day, it leaves you a clue. Not loud, not obvious, but undeniable if you're paying attention. There's a reason you're watching this right now. There's a reason the title called to you. This moment, here, is a sign too. Not because we said so, but because your body knows, because your soul remembers. Synchronicity is not magic. It's not superstition. It's the hidden architecture of a reality that is alive, conscious, and constantly communicating. You don't need to make it happen. You just need to notice when it does. Because once you do, everything changes, and the next time reality winks, you won't look away, you'll look back and smile, because now you remember how to listen. They weren't trying to hurt you, not directly, not intentionally, but they were trying to shape you into something easier to manage, something measurable, predictable, defined. From the moment you arrived here, eyes wide and soul still open, the world began to speak over the voice within you. You were taught letters before silence, rules before rhythms, facts before feelings. And slowly, the subtle things, the sacred things, were dismissed. You pointed out patterns in the clouds. They called it imagination. You said you felt something in a room. They told you you were being sensitive. You heard your name whispered in the wind, and they said the wind doesn't speak, but it did. It always did. They called it growing up, but in truth, it was narrowing down, fitting you into a system that had no place for mystery, a system that praised logic but feared meaning, a system that reduced the infinite to charts and checkboxes. In school, you were taught to look for answers, but only in the back of the book, never in your dreams, never in the goosebumps that rose without warning, never in the déjà vu that left you breathless. Science became sacred, but only the kind of science that rejected the soul. Even Carl Jung, who dared to explore the intersection of the psyche and the divine, was pushed to the margins of his field, branded mystical, dismissed by those who needed reality to remain small. And yet, he saw something. He listened when his patient spoke of strange alignments, impossible timings, symbols that visited them in waking life and sleep. He called it synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence with no causal link, yet rich with purpose. But even that word in time was sterilized, filed away, stripped of its sacred weight, because to admit synchronicity is real is to admit that something else is moving through all of this, something greater, something intelligent, something that cannot be sold. So instead, they taught you to laugh it off, to say that's weird, but never ask why. They made it easier to doubt than to believe, safer to ignore than to explore. Because if you began to trust those moments, if you began to follow them, you might stop following them. And that is dangerous, because a soul who follows the signs becomes harder to program, harder to sell to, harder to keep asleep. You were trained not to see, not because there was nothing to see, but because what you'd find would free you. But the truth, training can be undone. And the signs, they never stop speaking, not once. They've simply been waiting for the moment you begin to open your eyes again. It always starts the same way, a feeling, a flicker, a moment that repeats, but with no explanation. You glance at the clock, 11:11, again and again and again. At first, you laugh, call it cute, a fluke. But somewhere inside, it leaves a residue, like a fingerprint you can't quite rub off. Then it happens again. The same song, playing in the store, in the car, in your dreams. A name that shows up 3 times in one day. A phrase that echoes across strangers' lips, across different places, across impossible gaps in time. And suddenly, you wonder if you're going mad, but you're not. You're beginning to see. These are not glitches in the matrix. These are threads, invisible patterns woven into the tapestry of your life. And when they begin to shimmer, you feel it. Something is trying to get through. In psychology, they call it apophenia, the tendency to perceive meaningful patterns in random data. It's a clinical word, cold, dismissive. But what if it's not a flaw? What if it's a faculty? What if your soul was designed to notice what others overlook? Carl Jung didn't think you were imagining it. He believed the unconscious mind was trying to communicate that these moments of alignment, these patterns, were the psyche reaching across the veil, trying to re-establish contact. And sometimes it's not the psyche at all. Sometimes it's something else, something higher, a field of intelligence that exists outside of time, but knows exactly when to appear. Jung called it the acausal connecting principle. Events that are connected not by cause and effect, but by meaning. Meaning is the magnet, and when something meaningful is trying to find you, it will break through whatever it must. A dream that lingers, a number that chases you, a stranger who says exactly what you needed to hear, but didn't know you were asking. These are the cracks in the wall of logic. These are the moments when the invisible becomes undeniable. And if you trace them long enough, they begin to form a map. You see the same themes repeating, not just in your life, but in your emotion, your wounds, your longings. Synchronicities don't just appear out of nowhere. They orbit your awakening. They hover near transformation. They gather around thresholds, especially the ones you're afraid to cross. Most people don't follow the signs. They notice them, but they don't trust them, because trusting them means letting go of control, letting go of certainty, and stepping into something that feels bigger than you, but also eerily familiar, because deep down, you know these patterns. You've seen them before. maybe in another life, maybe in a dream, or maybe they've always been there, waiting for you to stop calling them coincidence and start calling them a conversation. He wasn't a mystic, not in the way they feared. He was a man of science, a psychiatrist, a thinker, a seeker. But Carl Jung dared to ask the one question science didn't want to face. What if the mind is not separate from the world it sees? What if they mirror each other? He watched patients break down and awaken in the same breath. He listened as they spoke of dreams that predicted the future, of symbols that appeared before death, of animals that arrived when healing was near. Too many stories, too much precision. It wasn't random, it wasn't just chance. So Jung gave it a name, synchronicity. He called it an acausal connecting principle, events that are not linked by logic or cause, but by meaning. It wasn't superstition, it was structure, a hidden language beneath reality. He wasn't alone in sensing it. Jung corresponded with physicist Wolfgang Pauli, one of the early architects of quantum mechanics. Pauli had experienced powerful synchronicities in his own life and believed consciousness played a mysterious role in the material world. Together, they explored what they called unus mundus, the one world, a place where psyche and matter are no longer divided. It wasn't a metaphor, it was a field, a bridge. And when that bridge is open, when the unconscious stirs and the outer world echoes it, a synchronicity occurs. To Jung, these weren't mere curiosities. They were proof of a deeper order, a sacred order, one that modern science had forgotten and ancient mystics always knew. The alchemists had spoken of it. The Hermeticists whispered, as above, so below. That was more than poetry. It was physics before physics, psychology before psychology. Jung didn't invent these truths. He remembered them and brought them into a world that had tried to forget. But of course, they didn't accept him. Many of his colleagues thought he'd gone too far, too mystical, too dangerous. Because if Jung was right, then the soul mattered. Then dreams were not just data, they were messages. Then your heartbreak wasn't just a disorder, it was a spiritual event. Then your strange moment on the street at 2:22 p.m. might be more than chance. It might be destiny checking in. But Jung didn't care to be popular. He cared to be true. And in his writings, especially in Synchronicity, and a causal connecting principle, he opened a door that could never be shut again. He showed us the sacred mirror, not in temples, not in visions, but in everyday life. He showed us that the universe is not blind. It reflects you, it listens, it remembers. And when you begin to notice the reflection, when the outer world starts to speak the language of your inner one, you're not hallucinating. You're standing in front of the sacred mirror, and it is speaking your name. Before you could read a clock, you already knew what time it was. Before you could write your name, you already recognized your reflection in the stars. You don't remember how, but there was a time when you listened to trees, spoke to animals without words, felt the weather in your bones. You watched the clouds shift and believed they were speaking. You saw a butterfly land beside you and felt chosen. You dreamed in symbols long before you learned to explain them away. Because as a child, you weren't looking at the world, you were inside of it. You didn't separate yourself from the sky or the grass or the whispering wind. You belonged to it, and it belonged to you. This wasn't fantasy. It was perception before programming. It was truth before translation. Children live in the now, and the now is where synchronicity lives. They don't question why the same number keeps appearing. They don't need scientific permission to find wonder in patterns. To them, magic is not impossible. It's inevitable. And here's the secret that no one told you. They were right. You weren't just imaginative, you were intuitive. Your senses were still attuned to the sacred. Your nervous system hadn't yet been drowned in static. Your inner world and the outer world still spoke the same language. Anthropologist Angelis Arian once wrote that children across cultures draw the same universal symbols: spirals, circles, stars, and crosses. They dream in archetypes. They move through ritual without even knowing it. That's not coincidence. That's soul memory. You came in already wired for wonder, already aligned with the pattern, already fluent in the quiet language of meaning. But over time, that vision was dimmed, not out of cruelty, but out of culture. You were taught to color within the lines, and then told what those lines were supposed to mean. You were rewarded for facts, not feelings, for right answers, not deep questions. You were told the clouds were just vapor, that butterflies had no message, that the wind didn't carry voices, just pressure systems and math. And slowly, you stopped listening. You learned to mistrust your awe, to ignore the tingle in your spine, to explain away the dreams, the chills, the knowing. But it never fully left you, because every so often, the child stirs, and in a moment of stillness, or heartbreak, or deep joy, the veil thins again, and you feel it. That same soft gaze, that quiet attention, that sacred noticing. The child you were is still here, not lost, only buried, and they remember. They remember the symbols, the rhythms, the secret language of signs. They've been waiting for you to stop rushing, to stop proving, to stop performing, and start listening again. Because the wisdom of the child is not about age, it's about presence. And presence is how you find your way back to the pattern. The soul doesn't speak in English, or Spanish, or math. It doesn't use logic or grammar or syntax. It speaks in symbols, in timing, in feeling. It sends you a message, not through a sentence, but through a moment, perfectly placed. You wake with a dream that haunts you. You feel a sudden emotion with no clear source. A stranger's eyes hold a memory you can't trace. A number shows up when your heart is torn between yes and no. These are not coincidences, they are communication. Because the soul is always speaking. Not with language, but with alignment. When you're out of alignment, the message feels like static, discomfort, an ache you can't name. Things don't flow, you force, you fight, you forget. But when you return to your center, even for a moment, the messages become clear. The world responds in rhythm. A symbol appears. An answer you weren't looking for walks right into your path. And something deep inside you says, yes, this is not magic. It is resonance. Ancient traditions have always known this. In Egypt, dreams were temples, not illusions. In Sufism, the beloved was not a person, but the soul's longing for union. And every poem, every pain, every moment of beauty was a signpost back to the divine. The I Ching, the tarot, the runes, all tools to read a language that cannot be written, only felt. Carl Jung believed that synchronicities were expressions of the collective unconscious, a field where archetypes and inner symbols interact with the outer world. When your inner state reaches a certain charge, the outer world reflects it back, not to reward you, not to punish you, but to remind you. You're in dialogue with something greater. A synchronistic moment isn't just a wink from the universe. It's a sentence in a larger paragraph, a ripple in the unfolding story of your awakening. But the mind wants answers. It wants to decode everything instantly, and so it rushes past the message, trying to pin it down like a butterfly beneath glass. But the soul doesn't work like that. The soul isn't linear. It doesn't deliver PDFs. It whispers through dreams, through repetition, through music, through color, through that strange feeling that washes over you when something just fits. You don't have to force it. You just have to listen and feel. If a moment gives you chills, pause. If a symbol keeps showing up, pay attention. If something feels more than it seems, it is. This is how the soul speaks, not through words, but through reminders. And when you learn how to listen, you start to realize something holy is always speaking back. They say it's just a story, just a dream, just a coincidence. But what if it's none of those things? What if every myth you've ever heard, every image that repeats in your dreams, every symbol that finds you when you need it most, is part of a deeper code? Not a code of logic, but of meaning. Carl Jung called them archetypes, not characters, not fantasies, but ancient blueprints embedded deep within the human psyche. Symbols that transcend culture, language, and time. The mother, the shadow, the hero, the seeker, the wise old man, the trickster, the lover, the rebirth. They don't live in books, they live in you. And when the world begins to mirror them, when your life starts echoing the structure of myth, you don't just feel like something is happening to you. You feel like something is waking within you. This is why synchronicities feel so personal, because they are not random signs. They are reflections of the archetypal forces moving through your life. A breakup isn't just heartbreak. It's the call of the death and rebirth cycle. A sudden opportunity isn't just good luck. It's the arrival of the mental archetype. The dream of drowning isn't just fear. It's the unconscious trying to pull you into emotional truth. And when you meet someone who changes everything, you're not just meeting a person. You're meeting a mirror, a figure who carries an energy your soul already knows. This is what makes the pattern feel sacred. Because it is. Joseph Campbell, who studied mythologies across the globe, found that all great stories follow the same arc. The hero's journey, departure, initiation, return, not just in fiction, but in life, in dreams, in the soul's journey through awakening. And when the universe places a sign in your path, when that song, that name, that vision appears, it's not just weird. It's the moment the outer world reveals the inner archetype trying to emerge. Synchronicity becomes the interface, the place where symbol and experience meet, where the unconscious and the divine align. You start to see the dragon, not as a fairy tale, but as your fear made visible. The mirror, not as glass, but as truth, reflecting what you haven't wanted to face. And just like that, you realize you're in the story. You always were. You're not watching the myth, you're living it. And the signs, they're the trail markers left by the ones who walked this path before you. When a pattern repeats, when an ancient symbol shows up in your dreams or on a stranger's t-shirt, don't dismiss it. That's not merchandise, it's a message. Because archetypes don't care about marketing. They care about meaning. And the moment you see them, really see them, you begin to remember the map, not a map to the world, a map to yourself. There was a time when the dreamers were sacred, when the ones who heard voices in the trees, who read the stars, who felt the shift in the wind before the storm came, were not dismissed. They were honored. They were called oracles, seers, shamans. They sat at the fire, not at the edges of society, but at the very heart of it, because they could listen, because they could see what others could not. But something changed. The great forgetting didn't happen overnight. It came slowly, cloaked in progress. It wore the robes of science, the suit of industry, the voice of logic. And at first, it brought real wonders. Cures, machines, electricity, predictability. But with each breakthrough, something softer was left behind. Something older, wiser, less convenient to measure. The inner world became pathology. The symbolic became irrational. The intuitive became dangerous. You were no longer taught to listen to your dreams. You were told to suppress them. Feeling too much became a diagnosis. Seeing signs became superstition. Hearing guidance from within. Delusion. Jung warned of this. He saw what was coming. A civilization drunk on reason, but starving for meaning. He watched the sacred become a symptom, and the mystic become a patient. In today's world, a child who sees too deeply, who questions too early, who notices patterns others ignore, is not seen as wise. They are labeled, medicated, redirected, stay on script, don't drift, don't ask why. The world became louder, faster, brighter, but emptier. And those who felt the emptiness most were told they were broken. But they were never broken. They were simply awake, in a world that was asleep. The Great Silencing wasn't just about censorship. It was about reprogramming, replacing the language of the soul with the language of profit, replacing the symbols of the sacred with signs for sale. You were taught to trust the screen over your senses, to believe the lab coat over your inner compass, to silence your knowing in order to survive. But knowing can't be unlearned. It waits. It lingers. It shows up when the distractions fall away. When your life begins to unravel just enough for the signs to slip through the cracks. You feel something again. You remember. And the old world, the sacred world, begins to whisper once more. You're not sick. You're not irrational. You're not imagining things. You're hearing the ancient voice beneath all the noise. And the more you listen, the more the noise begins to fade. Because you were never meant to go numb. You were never meant to live blind. The signs never stopped. You were simply taught to stop seeing them. But the silence is breaking, and the seer in you is beginning to wake up. Pain is not the enemy, it is the messenger. But we were never taught to listen to it. We were taught to silence it, to numb it, to fix it as fast as possible. A headache is just dehydration. A heartbreak is just hormones. A breakdown is just a chemical imbalance. But what if pain is something more? What if sometimes pain is the soul's last attempt to speak? When all other signs have been ignored, synchronicities don't just appear in moments of beauty and awe. They arrive in crisis, in collapse, in the shattering. And sometimes they only come after everything else has failed. The job falls apart, the relationship ends, the illness comes. And in that dark silence, something unexpected arrives. A message, a symbol, a memory, a moment that feels like it was placed there, just to catch you before you fall too far. The pain cracks you open, and in that fracture, the light finds a way in. This is not poetry, this is pattern. Carl Jung believed that neurosis, psychological suffering, often emerged when a person's life had become disconnected from their deeper self. When the ego wandered too far from the soul's design, the psyche would rebel, through dreams, through symbols, through suffering. not as punishment, but as a course correction. The soul doesn't scream, but pain does. Pain is the volume knob for a truth you've been avoiding. And when the synchronicities begin to cluster around that pain, they are not random. They are not cruel. They are signs that a threshold is near. You are not being broken. You are being invited to see what you would not see, to release what you refuse to let go, to become what you secretly long to be, but were too afraid to become. You may see a symbol from childhood. A person you haven't spoken to in years may suddenly appear. You may hear a phrase, a line, a dream that shakes you, and something clicks, not in your mind, but in your being. You were never off course. You were being rerouted, and the pain was the turning point. Indigenous traditions speak of illness as a spiritual event, not always caused by pathogens, but by disconnection. Disconnection from nature, from the ancestors, from the soul. And healing only begins when meaning is restored. When you start asking, what is this trying to show me? What truth have I buried beneath this pain? What alignment is waiting for me on the other side of this collapse? Not all synchronicities feel good, but the most important ones often hurt the most, because they come to undo the lie, to burn down the illusion, to pull you out of what no longer serves. Pain isn't proof that the universe has abandoned you. It may be proof that it's fighting for you, that it's been whispering all along, and when you didn't listen, it spoke louder, until finally you turned toward it and saw the message. There are moments when someone enters your life and everything shifts. You don't know why. You can't explain it. But something in you recognizes them. It's not logic, it's resonance. Like two notes on the same string, vibrating before they've even touched. Sometimes it's a stranger who says exactly what you needed to hear. Sometimes it's someone you haven't seen in years, reappearing at the exact moment you're about to fall apart. Sometimes it's a glance across a crowded room. That feels like remembering something you never learned. We call it fate. We call it soul contracts. We call it divine timing. But maybe it's something deeper. Quantum physics has a word for this: entanglement. Two particles, once connected, remain linked no matter how far they travel. Change one and the other responds instantly. There's no signal, no delay, no explanation science can fully map. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. But mystics, they just smiled because they'd known it all along. Entanglement isn't just a phenomenon between particles. It's a reflection of how the universe works at every level. Not through isolation, but through relationship. We are not separate beings. We are threads in a vast, invisible web. And when a thread is pulled, others move. When your energy shifts, you attract someone you never expected. When you ask a question in your heart, an answer appears from across the world. This isn't magic, it's physics and spirit, holding hands. Carl Jung saw this too. He wrote that meaningful coincidences often involve two seemingly unrelated events that came together at the perfect moment. But what if they weren't unrelated at all? What if the soul you needed was already entangled with yours before you ever met? What if that moment, that call, that encounter was the result of fields interacting, energy remembering itself? Synchronicity isn't just about symbols. It's about connection. It's about the invisible threads that tie your journey to others you cannot yet see. There are people whose lives are woven into yours before you even arrive. They are the ones who appear at the crossroads, the ones who trigger your awakening, the ones who hurt you in ways that push you to grow. and the ones who arrived like quiet prophets, just when you needed them most. You didn't summon them, you resonated with them. And when your energy aligned, the universe responded. We are not isolated observers in this world. We are participants in a sacred pattern, a living dialogue. And sometimes that dialogue speaks through another soul. So when someone enters your life, and it feels like more than coincidence, pause. That meeting may be a message, a mirror, a memory, because in the web of reality, nothing truly touches, without echoing through everything else. And the ones who find you in perfect timing, they were always entangled with your becoming. There are moments in life that don't feel like moments. They feel like thresholds. You can feel it in your body before your mind catches up. A quiet tension, a pull in two directions. The sense that whatever you choose next will change something deeper than you can see. This is the space where turning point synchronicities appear. Not in the background, but right in front of you, at the edge of endings, in the liminal space between chapters. In that silence where something is about to break or bloom. You're standing at the crossroads, torn between staying or leaving, speaking or staying silent, leaping or holding back. And that's when the universe moves. A feather falls where there shouldn't be any. A number flashes across the screen. Again, a stranger says the exact sentence. That answers the question. You hadn't spoken aloud. You weren't looking for a sign. But the sign was looking for you, because the soul always knows when the threshold is near. And it speaks in patterns, in echoes, in nudges you can't unfeel. Carl Jung wrote that synchronicities often cluster around moments of emotional intensity or transformation, not because we're imagining meaning, but because we're entering alignment. And alignment always attracts confirmation. Checkpoint synchronicities are not just encouragement, they're invitations. The signs are never neutral at these moments. They pulse, they sting, they soothe, they whisper, look closer. This is one of those moments, but no sign can choose for you. The message can guide, but only you can walk, and that's what makes it sacred. Synchronicity honors your free will. It offers the map, but it does not force your feet. So the choice arrives. Do you stay in the story you've outgrown? Or do you risk the unknown for something that calls to your bones? The signs may line the path, but they don't erase the fear. They don't remove the responsibility. They simply remind you, you are not walking blind. Turning point synchronicities are a form of grace. They don't guarantee comfort, but they offer clarity. And sometimes clarity is enough. Maybe it's a dream that shakes you awake. Maybe it's a person you haven't heard from in years, reaching out just as you're about to give up. Maybe it's a quiet voice that says, "This is your moment. Everything changes from here." You don't need 100 signs. You need one. That meets you in truth. One that says, yes, this is real. Yes, this is the door. And when you choose to walk through it, you're not just making a decision. You're stepping into a new rhythm, a new agreement with the universe, a new timeline that was always waiting for your yes. The sign was never meant to convince you. It was meant to confirm what your soul already knew. Time is not what you think it is. You were taught that time is linear, that it moves forward in a straight line, that seconds become minutes, minutes become hours, and eventually, a life. But that's only half the truth. In the ancient world, time was split into two forms. Chronos, the measurable, mechanical time, the ticking of clocks, the aging of the body, the deadlines, the calendars. But then there was Kairos, sacred time, divine timing. The moment when something is meant to happen, not because the clock says so, but because the soul is ready. Kairos is the time of synchronicity. It doesn't care about your schedule. It doesn't move on command. It moves with precision, but not your kind. And when a synchronicity arrives, it is never late. It is never early. It is always right on Kairos. Think about it. How many times have you run into the right person at the exact moment you needed them, or stumbled upon a book, a line, a symbol dash that answered a question you didn't even know you were carrying until that very instant? These aren't accidents. They are alignments. Kairos is the current beneath the surface of your life, pulling you toward experiences your conscious mind hasn't scheduled. Carl Jung believed that meaningful coincidences were not controlled by logic, but by a deeper archetypal necessity. They happened when the inner world and the outer world came into harmony, and the result was a moment that felt inevitable. Quantum physics, too, suggests that time is not a straight line, that all moments may exist simultaneously, waiting to be accessed. When the observer's consciousness reaches the right frequency. In this model, your future self may already be whispering back to you. And the synchronicity, that's the message. Breaking through the veil. Divine timing is not something you wait for. It's something you enter by becoming present, by becoming quiet, by becoming available to what is already here. Most people miss sacred timing because they're too busy chasing chronos, rushing, worrying, pushing through signs they were meant to receive. But the soul doesn't rush, it waits. And when you are ready, really ready, Kairos opens, and everything you thought was impossible begins to align, as if it had always been meant to. A door opens without a key. A message arrives from someone you haven't spoken to in years. The thing you almost gave up on suddenly returns, not because you forced it, but because the time was finally true. Synchronicities don't operate by chance. They are orchestrated with precision by a consciousness that lives beyond your calendar. So if something hasn't happened yet, don't assume it's denied. It may be waiting for the moment your soul catches up to it, because in sacred time, everything arrives exactly when it's meant to. Long before science claimed authority over truth, before clocks divided the day and algorithms defined reality, there were people who knew how to listen to the earth, to the sky, to the wind that changed direction, and the bird that flew alone. They didn't call it synchronicity, they called it life. For indigenous cultures around the world, the natural world was never separate. It was family, it was teacher, it was alive, and it was always speaking. The Lakota say that everything is related, mitakuye oyasing. The trees, the stones, the ancestors, the stars, all connected, all part of the same sacred breath. The Dagara people of West Africa believe that illness begins when a person forgets their purpose, when they become deaf to the signs that once guided them. In the Andean traditions, the concept of Pachamama is more than Earth as a planet. It is Earth as mother, as consciousness as partner in an eternal conversation. The Aboriginal people of Australia speak of songlines, invisible paths across the land, mapped not by roads, but by stories of vibrations, sacred memory. To walk the land was to walk the story. To live was to follow the signs. This wasn't mysticism, it was responsibility. It was alignment. The Shua of the Amazon received visions from plants, not metaphors, messages. When to move, when to hunt, when to stay still, The signs were constant, because the connection was never broken. They knew what modern culture forgot, that spirit does not speak in noise. It speaks in symbols, in timing, in the rhythm of the rain, and the direction of a shadow. Synchronicity was not a miracle, it was a language, and they were fluent. Carl Jung, deeply influenced by indigenous cosmologies, recognized that the modern psyche had become disconnected, not just from itself, but from the earth, and that this disconnection created suffering. Because the more you forget the earth is alive, the more silent the world becomes. And the more silent the world becomes, the more alone you feel. But the earth never stopped speaking. You just stopped listening. You stopped asking the wind what it wanted. You stopped thanking the river. You stopped sitting long enough to hear the message beneath the birdsong. But there is a way back. Begin to treat every moment as if it might be a messenger, a symbol, a presence. Don't wait for lightning bolts. Watch for the subtle, because the more attention you offer the unseen, the more it begins to show itself. To indigenous cultures, synchronicity wasn't proof of the divine. It was the divine, woven into every part of life. The sacred was never separate. It was in the soil, in the dreams, in the pause between heartbeats. And when you walk with that remembrance, the earth begins to speak again. Not because it ever stopped, but because you finally returned to the conversation. There comes a time when life stops asking and starts calling. You feel it not in your mind, but in your bones, in the ache that won't go away, in the restlessness you can't explain, in the signs that start to appear more frequently and more urgently. The numbers show up again. The dream returns. A phrase you heard once as a child suddenly lands differently, and deep inside, you're standing at the edge of something, an invisible line, a door that doesn't open with a key, but with surrender. You thought it was just coincidence, but it was initiation. Synchronicities are not random flickers of magic. They are thresholds. Moments when the soul knocks louder. Moments when you are no longer allowed to pretend you didn't hear. In ancient traditions, initiations were marked by fire, by trial, by separation from the known, an entry into something sacred. You had to leave behind the false identity, the roles, the lies, the comfort. Initiation didn't ask for permission. It required presence. And it came when the time was right. Today we don't recognize them. We experience breakdowns, burnouts, heartbreaks, losses that pull the floor out from under us. And we think something's gone wrong, but something deeper is happening. The path you were walking no longer fits the truth of who you are becoming. And the synchronicities, they're the soul's breadcrumbs scattered across the chaos. They are invitations, clues, not to escape the pain, but to see it as the gate. This is the initiation you didn't sign up for, but secretly asked for, in your prayers, in your dreams, in the longing you buried years ago. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Synchronicities are the unconscious becoming visible. They are moments when your deeper self pulls back the curtain, just enough for you to see the truth you've been circling. You don't need a ceremony to be initiated. You need a moment of recognition, a choice, to step out of the old pattern and into the unknown, to stop pretending and start aligning, to follow the signs, even when they don't make sense to anyone else. The initiation isn't about perfection, it's about integrity. It's about walking the path that calls your soul, not the one that pleases the world. And the signs, they will not beg, they will not wait forever. but they will return. Until you do, one day you'll look back and see that the breakdown was the doorway, the pattern was the map, and the coincidence was the calling. You were never lost. You were just being prepared. Because every sacred path begins with a sign you almost missed. And the moment you said yes, the real journey finally began. It always starts like a whisper, a pattern, a presence, a gentle nudge that you almost ignore. Until one day, it doesn't whisper anymore. It speaks, clearly, undeniably, and you realize this isn't your imagination. This is real. You've heard the stories. Someone thinking about an old friend and receiving a call seconds later. A dream that shows the future, with detail too precise to explain away. A stranger saying the exact words you needed to hear, words you hadn't spoken to anyone but had been screaming inside. These are not cute moments, they're cosmic interventions. They're moments when the veil lifts and something behind the curtain steps forward. This is one of those stories. A woman stands at the edge. She's grieving. Her partner has passed, and the silence is unbearable. She walks through the motions of life without feeling any of it. One morning, she sits by the window and whispers aloud, "If you're still with me, show me something, anything." She doesn't expect an answer. Not really. But within seconds, a butterfly, bright blue, the exact kind they once chased together, lands on her hand. Still, alive software. And she weeps. Not because she saw a butterfly, but because in that moment she knew it was him. It was real. And life had just spoken. Science will offer explanations, probability, chance, brain pattern recognition. But the soul doesn't measure things like that. The soul knows by how it feels, and some feelings leave no room for doubt. Carl Jung once shared a moment like this with a patient. She spoke of a dream involving a golden scarab, an ancient symbol of transformation and rebirth. As she described it, a real scarab beetle flew into the room and tapped against the window. Not just any insect, a rare one, a sacred one. At the exact moment, her unconscious was trying to make its way into consciousness. It broke her resistance, and in that moment, he knew she was ready to heal. That's what these moments do. They crack the shell, they pierce the veil. They speak in a language you don't need to translate, because every cell in your body already understands it. The moment the universe speaks clearly is the moment you remember. You've never been alone. It doesn't always look like magic. Sometimes it's subtle. A page falling open to the exact quote. A person saying your secret out loud. A song playing just as you needed courage. But in that moment, everything stops. You are still, and you feel it. A thread pulling everything together. You no longer wonder if the universe is communicating. You know it is, because in that moment, it didn't just whisper, it answered, and it changed you forever. There's a strange moment that happens after the sign appears, after the pattern repeats, after the universe speaks so clearly. You can no longer pretend you didn't hear it, and still you resist. Not because you don't believe, but because you're afraid, because following the signs often means letting go of something you've been clinging to. A job, a person, a version of yourself that no longer fits. So you second guess, you rationalize, you tell yourself it's just a coincidence, even though something deeper in you is screaming, "Number that was real." We resist the signs because they demand change. They ask for trust before certainty. They invite us into a future we can't yet see. And for most of us, that's terrifying. Carl Jung once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And he was right. We resist, not because we're blind, but because we're not ready to see. Because seeing requires action, and action requires risk. So we go back to what's safe, to the familiar pain, to the predictable cycle. Even when the signs are everywhere, the same numbers, the same message in 3 different mouths, the same closed doors, over and over again. Synchronicities don't stop when you ignore them. They change, they intensify. What begins as a whisper becomes a pattern. And if the pattern is denied, it becomes a rupture. Life will never punish you, but it will press you. It will tighten the space around your inauthenticity until there is no room left to lie to yourself. Because the signs are not decorations, they are instructions. They are lifelines. And when they arrive, they are offering you a way out or a way in to your truth, to your purpose, to the deeper current your soul came here to follow. But here's the paradox. The more we resist, the more the signs must wake us. And sometimes that awakening is not gentle. The job collapses. The relationship dissolves. The plan falls apart. And in the rubble, the message shines. You already knew, you just didn't want to know. But knowing is not the end. It's the return. Because when you stop resisting, you start remembering. And everything that once felt like a threat now feels like a guide. The cost of ignoring the signs is not punishment, it's delay, a detour through suffering that eventually leads you back to the same truth that your life has been speaking to you all along. And every time you said no, it simply waited for the day you'd finally say yes. The signs never disappear, but you can. Not completely, not forever, but slowly. You get busy, you get tired, you stop listening, and without even realizing it, you fall asleep again. Not the kind of sleep that rests you, the kind that makes you forget. At first, the signs were everywhere. Numbers, dreams, perfectly timed meetings, moments that cracked open your chest and whispered, "There's something more." But then life pulls you back. Deadlines, bills, noise. The static of the world grows louder than the signal of your soul. And the synchronicities, they don't stop, but they soften. Not because they're gone, but because your presence isn't there to catch them. Awareness is the receiver. Without it, even the clearest message becomes invisible. You check your phone instead of your breath. You scroll instead of reflect. You rush from one task to the next, as if urgency is proof of importance. But meaning doesn't live in urgency. It lives in stillness. And stillness is where the signs are loudest. Carl Jung believed that synchronicities arise when the unconscious pushes into consciousness. But that push requires openness. It requires availability. And most of us are trained to be anywhere but here. We become dull to the miraculous. We stop noticing the rhythms, and life begins to feel flat again. But the beauty of the path is that it never judges you. It just waits. The moment you return to presence, the signs return to you. One deep breath, one pause in the middle of your chaos, one walk without headphones, one journal entry where you finally tell the truth, and suddenly, the world moves again. The owl appears. The song you needed plays on shuffle. A stranger speaks a phrase that lifts the fog, and the energy around you sharpens. It's not that the signs came back, it's that you did. Because the conversation never ended. You just stepped away from it. And the moment you come back, the universe picks up where you left off. That's the grace of this journey. You're never punished for forgetting. You're only reminded to remember. So if you feel disconnected, don't panic. You're not broken. You're not lost. You're just asleep. And sleep is sacred too. Even the caterpillar dissolves completely before it becomes the butterfly. But there comes a time to wake, to stretch your perception, to open your eyes, not just outward, but inward. And when you do, you'll notice the signs were always there, in the numbers, in the timing, in the feeling you couldn't explain. They don't punish you for missing them. They simply shine again, when your heart is open enough to see. Because the signs don't stop, but your awareness can, and when it returns, so does the magic. You keep searching for answers outside of you, in books, in voices, in signs written in the sky. But there's something you've forgotten, something ancient, something hidden right behind your own eyes. You are the oracle, not because you know everything, but because you feel the truth before anyone has to tell you. The world has trained you to doubt your knowing, to second guess, to seek validation, to wait for permission. But the deepest synchronicities don't come to teach you something new. They come to remind you of what your soul already knows. Carl Jung believed the unconscious held every answer you'd ever need. That the dreams, the symbols, the spontaneous visions, they weren't random. They were you trying to speak without language. He called it individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, by integrating what you've ignored. And that process doesn't start with a guru. It starts with a question. What am I not hearing? What have I always known, but was too afraid to trust? Synchronicities arise when your inner truth and the outer world come into alignment. The sign only has power because something inside you is already resonating with it. You feel chills, you feel tears rise, you feel a memory that was never spoken, but somehow lives inside your bones. And in that moment, you remember, you don't need the sign to give you the answer. You are the one who gives the sign its meaning. The mystics knew this. In ancient temples, the oracle was not just a seer. She was a mirror, a reflection of what you were ready to accept. The answers she gave depended on the questioner, and that hasn't changed. Every time you ask for a sign, you are not looking for random magic. You are looking for confirmation of what you already feel rising. The sign arrives and the decision is clear, not because the sign made it clear, but because your soul was already halfway there. The world reflects you. It always has. And the more you awaken, the more the signs don't shock you. They affirm you. You no longer feel desperate for guidance. You start to recognize your own power. You start to trust that inner pulse, the one that says yes, before your mind can catch up. You are not lost. You are listening, and you are remembering that your perception is not flawed. It is the compass. You don't need a prophet. You don't need a perfect moment. You need to trust what your body feels when truth passes through, because you were never meant to follow signs blindly. You were meant to feel them as echoes of your own wisdom. You are not waiting for the oracle. You are the oracle, and you always have been. You can't force a sign. You can't chase a synchronicity. You can only become still enough to notice what's already there, The universe is always communicating, but its language is subtle. Its messages don't shout. They shimmer. They drift in on the edge of a moment, on the breath between distractions, on the space you rarely allow yourself to enter. Stillness. In this world, stillness is almost rebellion. You are rewarded for motion, for noise, for filling every second with doing. But meaning doesn't live in motion, it lives in presence. Synchronicities do not arrive when you demand them. They arrive when you are ready to receive. And readiness is not about effort, it's about attunement, creating space, making room, not just in your calendar, but in your awareness. The ancient mystics knew this. They built altars, lit candles, stepped barefoot onto the earth before asking anything of it. They practiced seeing, not with their eyes, but with their soul. They understood that ritual is not superstition. Its structure is the art of creating conditions in which the sacred can be felt. It might look simple: a breath before you speak, a journal by the bed, a question whispered before sleep. But that tiny act of intentionality is the doorway. Carl Jung often emphasized the power of active imagination, a space where the conscious and unconscious meet, where images can speak, where the soul has room to move. But imagination requires quiet. It requires attention. It requires you to stop performing long enough, to be with yourself. That is where synchronicity lives, in the liminal space, the in-between, the gap between cause and effect, where something deeper slips through. If you want to see more signs, start by listening more often. Turn your walk into a ceremony. Turn your tea into a moment of communion. Put your phone down when the wind changes. Pause when you feel the tingle at the back of your neck. Ask, what's trying to reach me right now? And don't expect an answer in the form you imagined. Expect it in the language of spirit, in timing, in color, in repetition, in feeling. Ritual is not about performance. It's about presence. Stillness is not about doing nothing. It's about doing one thing with your whole self. And when you give the world that kind of attention, the world gives you back its messages. It meets you softly, perfectly. You don't need incense and robes unless those hold meaning for you. You need sincerity. You need intention. You need to make seeing a practice, because the sacred doesn't force itself upon you. It waits for your invitation. And once you open the door, once you give it space to enter, you'll find that the signs were never far. They were just waiting for your stillness to begin. At first, synchronicities feel like magic, like glitches in the simulation, moments so precise they make your heart stop. You wonder if you're imagining things, if your mind is just playing tricks. But something inside knows better. You weren't confused. You were being introduced. What began as strange soon becomes sacred, because the more it happens, the more it stops feeling like coincidence and starts feeling like conversation. A rhythm begins to form, not outside of you, but within you. You don't just witness synchronicities anymore. You dance with them. You start to sense them before they arrive. Feel the energy shift in a room. Know that something is coming before it has a chance to take form. And when it does, you're no longer surprised. You're grateful, because the invisible has become intimate. Carl Jung describes synchronicity as the bridge between the inner world and the outer world, a mirror of the psyche reflected in the events around you. But when that mirror becomes clear enough, you begin to trust what you see in it, not as fantasy, but as truth, not as proof, but as presence. This is the shift. When synchronicity is no longer a rare event, but a natural state, Not every moment will sparkle with divine fire, but more and more, you feel supported, you feel watched over, not by something judging you, but by something guiding you, walking with you. You find yourself moving slower, choosing differently, trusting your instincts more than you ever have. And you notice how life responds. You say no to the thing that doesn't feel right, and something better appears. You follow the strange impulse to call someone, and they tell you, "I was just thinking of you." This is not luck, it's alignment, and alignment makes life feel not easier, but truer. You still face pain, still face doubt, but now you walk through it with eyes open, because you've seen the pattern. You've learned how it moves. You start to live like every moment matters, because it does. You listen to the soft signals, not just the loud ones. You pay attention to what repeats, to what returns, to what calls to you, even when you try to dismiss it. And eventually, the line between the seen and unseen starts to dissolve. You don't separate the sacred from the ordinary anymore. You recognize that all things, even the even the quiet, even the broken, can be messages in disguise. You stop looking for signs because you become one, to others, to yourself, to the world that forgot how to listen. This is the intimacy of the invisible, when the mystery is no longer something you observe, but something you live, and you finally understand that the universe never wanted to impress you. It only wanted to walk with you, one sign at a time. There's something almost eerie about how the signs follow you. When you finally move toward what's true, they begin to multiply. The numbers align, the right people appear. The message shows up in books, in strangers, in songs you weren't supposed to hear. You feel it in your bones. You're not walking alone anymore. You're walking with something. And more than that, you're being watched, not in fear, but in awe, as if the universe itself is nodding gently, whispering, "Yes, this is not a fantasy. This is energetic resonance." Carl Jung called it meaningful coincidence. Because when your inner world aligns with your outer choices, reality responds. You shift your vibration, and the mirror of life shifts with you. Because the mirror always moves when you do. When you're on the wrong path, the signs fade. The air feels heavy. You wake up tired. Synchronicities become rare, muted, as if the music has gone out of tune. And it's not because life is punishing you. It's because you've stepped out of flow, out of integrity, out of the timeline your soul is trying to live. And so, the messages become quiet, or they arrive in discomfort, in illness, in delay, in closed doors. But the moment you return, even with one small act of courage, everything quickens again. You feel the pulse. You hear the yes behind the curtain. The signs become radiant, and the path becomes undeniable. You meet someone at the exact moment you needed them. You're guided to a decision you didn't have the logic for, but had the faith to follow. And then it works, not perfectly, not without challenge, but with meaning. The truth is, synchronicity is a compass, and the more aligned you are, the louder the compass speaks, because the universe isn't just showing you signs, it's showing you yourself, your own frequency, your own readiness, your own becoming. This is why you can't force synchronicity, but you can invite it. Through presence, through bravery, through the quiet promise, I will no longer abandon what I know to be true. The mirror doesn't reward belief, it reflects embodiment. So when you walk the right path, not the easy one, not the popular one, but the one that feels like home in your body, The signs flood in, and when you betray that path, the silence grows. Not because you're cursed, but because your soul is waiting for you to return. You were never meant to chase signs. You were meant to walk with them, to become so honest, so real, that life itself begins to echo you. That's when the mirror moves, not to lead you, but to walk beside you. Because once you align with truth, reality can't help but mirror it back. You keep asking for a sign, but the truth is, you're already in the conversation. The universe didn't start speaking just now. It's been speaking since you were born. In dreams you forgot. In moments you brushed aside. In the gentle tug that told you to pause, turn left, say no, say yes. You're not waiting for the signs. The signs have been waiting for you. To slow down enough to hear. To be honest enough to feel. To stop dismissing your intuition as something secondary when it was always sacred. You see, this isn't about messages being withheld. It's about messages being missed. Because the soul doesn't shout. It nudges, it whispers. It stirs your chest when something is off. It opens your lungs when something is right. And if you look back, you'll see it. You'll remember those moments you couldn't explain. The person who showed up at the perfect time. The accident that forced you to change. The phrase a stranger said that pierced your heart like a memory you didn't know you had. That was the conversation. And it never ended. Carl Jung once said, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order." What he meant was, there's a rhythm behind the noise. And when your awareness deepens, you begin to hear it. Synchronicity isn't about adding magic to your life. It's about noticing that the magic has always been there. And once you notice, the floodgates open. The lights flicker at the right moment. The lyrics echo your exact question. The number on the receipt matches the date of a memory you'd buried long ago. It's not random. It's never been random. But here's the twist. The universe doesn't give you signs to control you. It gives you signs to collaborate with you, to awaken your co-creation, to remind you that you're not a passive observer. You're a participant, a frequency, a field of intelligence that answers. Every time you ask sincerely, this is why intention matters, why presence matters. Because when you speak from your heart, the world replies, maybe not in words, but in reflection, in pattern, in unexpected timing. The synchronicities don't appear to you, they appear through you. They are the mirror, responding to your movement. So stop asking if you're ready to receive. Start remembering that you already have. You are not on the outside, trying to get in. You are inside the conversation already. Every sign you've ever seen is a reply to a part of you that dared to believe there was something more, and there is, always. But it begins with this moment, this awareness, this breath, because the conversation doesn't start when the sign arrives. It starts when you realize you've been listening all along. You won't find synchronicity in the past, and you can't manufacture it in the future. It only lives here, now in this breath, in this exact intersection of awareness and reality. Synchronicity is the language of the now, not the rushed now, not the distracted now, not the scrolling, multitasking, thinking about later now, but the real now, the sacred pause where you notice, where the veil thins, where life speaks. Because in the present moment, you're no longer just doing, you're perceiving. And when you fully perceive, you become available to symbols, to intuition, to messages you otherwise miss. When you're lost in memory or seduced by projection. Most people never truly arrive in their own life. They live in yesterday's regrets or tomorrow's fears. But synchronicity doesn't follow that calendar. It's not interested in what already happened, and it won't wait for you to be ready. It whispers now, always now. And if you're not here, you won't hear it. Eckhart Tolle wrote, "Realize deeply that the present moment is all you ever have. Make the now the primary focus of your life." He wasn't speaking poetically. He was pointing directly at the portal. The now is where truth meets form. It's the only place your soul can actually act from. It's the only place the signs are. Synchronicity is not a trick. It's not proof of control. It's presence, reflecting presence. Think about it. How often has a meaningful sign appeared? Only when you were fully present, walking quietly, in awe, in surrender, in silence after a heartbreak, in wonder after a prayer. Because those are the moments when your timeline dissolves, when you stop rehearsing and start witnessing. And in that sacred pause, a bird lands at your feet. A child says the exact words you needed to hear. The breeze shifts, and you know, you're not alone, you're not forgotten. You're being reminded that the entire universe is here with you in this instant. But you have to return, again and again, because your mind will try to leave. It will rush, plan, doubt, distract, and every time it does, gently bring it back, not with force, but with breath, with sensation, with gratitude, because the now is not just a moment, it's a frequency, and synchronicity lives on that frequency. Not to impress you, but to invite you, to show you that meaning isn't hiding. It's unfolding, right here, right now. So stop waiting for the perfect sign. Instead, arrive. And when you do, you'll start to see the patterns again. Not because they weren't there before, but because you finally slowed down enough to see them. That's the secret, not chasing the signs, but becoming so present, they have no choice but to meet you here. They say numbers are just numbers, dreams are just neurons firing, symbols are just metaphors. But when they start to repeat, when they arrive with timing too perfect to dismiss, you feel it, that subtle pull, that knowing, like something is speaking a language you once understood, but forgot how to read. This is not superstition. It's sacred rhythm. It's pattern as prophecy. Not because it predicts your future, but because it aligns you with your soul. The ancient Greeks believed in the music of the spheres, that numbers and geometry were not just logic, but a divine frequency. Pythagoras saw numbers as sacred forces, each with their own vibration. And today, mystics and seekers still report the repetition of numbers 1 1 1 2 2 2 4 4 4 as more than chants. They are nudges, echoes of a deeper pattern your soul already recognizes. Numbers, dreams, and symbols don't originate outside you. They emerge from your field, your unconscious, your higher self, the divine intelligence you're made of. That's why when they repeat, it's not coincidence, it's communication. Carl Jung explored this deeply. He called it the collective unconscious, a psychic inheritance that contains universal archetypes, not invented by culture, but embedded in it. And when these archetypes rise into awareness, they come dressed in symbols: a wolf, a spiral, a staircase, a falling feather, a clock that always stops at the same time. They're not random, they're code. And your job is to start listening to the code, not with logic, but with presence. Because what happens in the dream world doesn't stay in the dream world. It bleeds into the waking life. in symbols, sensations, and signs. That recurring dream about a hallway you can't exit, it's not just stress. It's your soul showing you a cycle. That number you keep seeing before you make big decisions, it's not meaningless. It's the universe mirroring your moment of power. When something repeats, it asks for reverence. Not obsession, but reverence. It's an invitation to slow down, to ask, what's the energy behind this? What does this symbol stir in me? What am I being reminded to remember? Because the soul doesn't speak in sentences. It speaks in patterns, in resonance, in rhythm. And your life, believe it or not, has a rhythm. It's playing out like a symphony, sometimes subtle, sometimes thunderous. And the signs are the notes. When they repeat, it's not a glitch. It's a chord that's meant to be played louder. A theme returning in your soul's song. You don't need to decode it all at once. You only need to pay attention, to trust what stirs your gut, to follow what awakens your awe. Because the signs you see are not random details. They're the sacred language of your becoming. And when you begin to listen, you start to remember something deep and ancient and utterly personal. You were never meant to understand it all. You were only meant to follow the music. They were never just dreamers, the mystics, the prophets, the visionaries. They were pattern readers, symbol interpreters, bridge walkers between this world and something deeper. They didn't see the world as random. They didn't believe in coincidence. They believed in alignment, in timing, in the whisper that comes not from logic, but from soul. Moses turned aside from his path, not because of a burning bush, but because he noticed it. The fire was always there, but he chose to look. The Buddha saw the suffering of the world and followed a path of stillness, of inner observation. And under that Bodhi tree, it wasn't thunder that awakened him. It was silence, the great synchronicity between letting go and becoming. Joan of Arc heard voices, but not madness, messages, guidance. And though the world called her delusional, history remembered her as touched by something divine. Carl Jung followed dreams so strange. His peers feared for his sanity. But those dreams, those symbols, they became the foundation for his understanding of synchronicity itself. He wasn't just studying it, he was living it. Look at Teresa of Avila, Rumi, Black Elk, Lao Tzu. All different lands, different tongues, different ages, but all spoke the same language. The sacred language of timing, of signs, of something larger moving through them. They walked not by sight, but by sensation, by recognition, by surrender. Because once you begin to notice the signs, you stop demanding certainty, and you start trusting the thread. And that thread, the one that tugged at them, is the same thread that tugs at you. It's lineage, spiritual lineage. Not of blood, but of awareness. They were not better than you. They were just more still, more attentive, more willing to lose control. In order to receive clarity, they built altars not to worship idols, but to remember presence, to become students of the sky, the earth, the wind, to see meaning in the way a leaf fell, or a child laughed, or a storm broke open a path. They did not ask, "Is this real?" They asked, "What am I being asked to see?" And that question, that humility, opened the gates of revelation. What if the same gates are opening for you? What if the signs in your life are not lesser because you're not in robes or temples or caves? What if you are the modern mystic, learning to read a world so full of wonder that it can barely contain it? The signs they followed are the signs you now feel, the conversation they entered, never ended. It only waits for the next one brave enough to listen, to trust the unseen, to walk without proof, but with presence. You don't need to become them. You only need to remember you walk in their footsteps every time you follow the thread. At first, the signs are subtle, a whisper, a flicker in your chest, a strange alignment that feels too perfect to be chance. You shrug it off until it happens again and again, until the pattern becomes undeniable. And then, when you're close to something big, they start to flood in. It's not your imagination. It's the resonance rising. It's your soul drawing closer to its next threshold. And when you near the truth about who you are, what you're here for, what must be shed, synchronicity becomes louder, sharper, more precise, because the veil is thinner at the edge of transformation. Have you ever noticed? The moments before the biggest decision, the deepest awakening, the most radical letting go, that's when the numbers start showing up everywhere. That's when the dreams grow vivid. That's when you overhear strangers saying things that sound like they were meant just for you. The closer you get to your true path, the more reality bends to show you the mirror. Because you're not just walking toward truth, you're becoming ready to receive it. Your inner frequency is shifting, and so the outer world begins to align. Carl Jung believed synchronicity was not just psychological, but a causal. A meeting between the inner and outer worlds. That doesn't follow cause and effect, but meaning and resonance. Meaning, when you are about to make a leap, your entire energy field is stirred, and the universe responds, not to manipulate you, but to confirm you, to encourage, to prepare, to say, yes, this is it, keep going. It's why people report the most synchronicities in moments of spiritual awakening, emotional crisis, or life-changing decisions. Because in those moments, you're open, raw, honest, receptive. You've dropped the mask, and the signs can finally reach you. Think of it like this. You're tuning a radio. When you're out of alignment, the signal is static. When you're close, the frequency sharpens. The closer you get to truth, the louder the signal becomes. That's not chaos, that's coherence. But here's the warning. When the signs get loud, don't run. Don't doubt. Don't ask for more proof. Trust what is being asked of you. Because this is not just about guidance, it's about preparation. The signs aren't just showing you what's coming, they're strengthening you to receive it. A decision is approaching. An identity is dying. A version of you is dissolving. And the signs are here. Because the next door is real, close, opening. So breathe, listen, say thank you, and keep walking. Because the flood of signs is not meant to overwhelm. It's meant to awaken. To confirm what your soul already knows. You are standing at the edge of transformation, and the universe is holding a lantern to light your way through. Most people think that synchronicity is a tool, a lever, a way to control the outcome. But the truth is, synchronicity was never meant to be manipulated. It was meant to be met. There is a sacred difference between chasing signs to get what you want and noticing signs because you're in alignment with who you truly are. One is desperation. The other is devotion. In the first, you say dash. Give me a sign so I can control what happens. In the second, you whisper dash. I trust the signs because I've surrendered to the flow. Can you feel the difference? Control is fear in disguise. It says, I don't trust the unknown, so I'll use the language of spirit to force my own will into the future. But alignment real alignment, is rooted in presence, in deep listening, in humility. You don't use synchronicity like a hammer to break reality open. You let it reveal what's already becoming true. And this distinction matters because when you chase synchronicity for ego's sake, it fades, it confuses, it distorts. You begin to interpret every coincidence as validation for your attachment, not as a reflection of your truth. But when you let go, when you surrender the outcome, detach from the timeline, and open your heart to what wants to unfold, synchronicity becomes sacred again. It becomes clear, alive, organic. It doesn't answer your demand. It responds to your vibration. The mystics knew this. They didn't ask for signs with conditions. They became quiet enough to notice what was already unfolding. They trusted that when the moment was right, the next door would open, and they would recognize it, not because they forced it, but because they were ready. Think of nature. The bird does not ask the wind to blow east. It waits, feels, then lifts its wings. When the wind comes, that's alignment. Synchronicity is not a vending machine for your preferences. It is a sacred mirror that reflects your state of being. So if the signs have stopped, don't panic, don't push, don't demand more proof. Return to presence, return to stillness, return to the inner integrity that brought the signs in the first place. When you are in alignment, the signs find you because you're no longer trying to bend the river. You become the current. Let this be your prayer. Let me see clearly, not so I can control, but so I can serve, so I can remember why I came. Because in the end, synchronicity is not about making life obey your will. It's about becoming so aligned that your life becomes an answer to something greater than yourself. It's not new, this feeling, this knowing, this moment where something aligns so perfectly, so unexpectedly, that it stirs something deep inside you, something ancient, something you forgot you were missing. That is not discovery, that is remembrance. Synchronicity is not teaching you something for the first time. It's whispering what your soul already knew, before the noise, before the forgetting, before the world told you that meaning was naive. Every moment of synchronicity is a breadcrumb from your own path, not one laid by chance, but by a deeper you, the you that lives beyond time, the you that agreed to come here and planted messages along the way so you wouldn't lose your way entirely. You weren't meant to live blind. You weren't meant to believe this was random. You weren't meant to silence the ache for more. You were meant to remember. Remember the way a name shows up 3 times before a door opens, the way your childhood song plays right before you make a life-changing decision, the way your body stills, your breath halts, because something in you recognizes the invisible hand at work, not chance, not hallucination, but the soul, calling out from behind the veil with a lantern, and a voice you forgot was yours. Carl Jung called it the reunion of the self, a return to wholeness, and synchronicity is one of its languages, one of its sacred signs, not meant to be analyzed to death, but to be felt, to be honored. When the ancients looked at the stars, they didn't see burning gas. They saw gods, stories, messages, not because they were delusional, but because they remembered that everything is speaking if you remember how to listen. And that's what the signs ask of you now. Not to chase them, not to decode them like puzzles, but to feel them, to trust their timing, to recognize them as the sacred echoes of a wisdom that never left you, only waited for your return. The veil is thinner now. Not because the world changed, but because you did. Your awareness cracked open. Your frequency rose. Your ego surrendered. Just enough for the remembering to break through. So don't dismiss it. Don't reduce it to coincidence. And please, don't ignore it. You planted these signs long ago, in a place beyond space, in a knowing deeper than words. You chose to forget, so that remembering would awaken you fully. And now, the signs are rising because your soul is. This isn't about magic. This is about memory, the sacred kind, the soul kind, the kind you feel in your bones before your mind can explain it. You are not being shown something new. You are being shown you, and you were always meant to remember. It was never random, not the detours, not the delays, not the people who came into your life, nor the ones who vanished without warning, not the job you didn't get, not the love that didn't stay, not the strange symbols that kept showing up, in dreams, on clocks, in songs, in the mouths of strangers. It was all part of something, not rigid, but responsive, not scripted, but sacredly choreographed, a dance between your free will and the divine whisper that lives just beneath it. Every tear you cried, every time you doubted, even the nights you felt forgotten, they were woven into the fabric of your becoming. Because synchronicity doesn't just arrive to guide you, it arrives to reveal you, to remind you that even the chaos had a pulse, even the pain had direction, even the silence had a voice. When you look back now, you can see it, can't you? The breadcrumbs, the golden thread, the impossible timings, the friend who said exactly what you needed to hear without knowing why, the moment you decided to stay, and the whole path changed. The number that kept appearing until you finally paid attention, and everything aligned. Not luck, not chance, not fantasy. It was a conversation, one you didn't know you were in, but you were always listening. In your heart, in your gut, in the subtle knowing that something bigger was walking with you. Carl Jung said that synchronicity is the external realization of an internal state, that what you see in the world is reflecting what your soul is ready to know. So when the signs began to flood in, it wasn't because something outside of you changed. It was because you did. You became available. You softened. You opened your eyes and looked with the eyes beneath them. And suddenly, life wasn't just happening to you. It was happening for you, with you, through you. This is the divine choreography, not a rigid plan, but a living, breathing dance between intention and intuition, between choice and destiny, between you and the invisible world that has never stopped loving you. The signs were always there, but now you see them. And when you do, you realize something deeper than truth. You realize meaning, that every broken moment was a doorway, every strange coincidence was a sacred alignment, every quiet nudge was a celestial note. In a symphony, you're only just beginning to hear. This isn't randomness, this is remembrance, this isn't control, this is communion. You don't need to understand every step, you only need to trust the rhythm, because the rhythm is real. And you are not lost in it. You are made of it. You always have been. They never stopped. Not really. The signs, the echoes, the whispers stitched into your day, like soft threads of light, they still speak when you pause long enough to hear. They still guide when your heart is quiet enough to receive. Even now, as you listen to these words, as your breath slows, as your soul leans in, they are speaking, not in thunder, not in flashing lights, but in the subtle dance of this very moment, in the way it found you, in the way it feels like it was meant to. Because it was. You see, synchronicity is not an event. It's a state, a sacred awareness, a willingness to believe that life is not an accident, and neither are you. It's an invitation to remember that you are not separate from the mystery that surrounds you. You are not lost in the vastness. You are held by it, spoken to by it, guided gently, lovingly by it, but only if you're listening. And this is the question now. Will you? Will you stop needing more proof and start living from trust? Will you stop asking the signs to bend to your desires and instead bend your life toward the sacred? Will you remember that you came here with a purpose? You don't have to force, only follow. The world will keep pulling you into forgetting, into doubt, into rushing, into logic without heart. But you were born to remember, and every synchronicity, every moment that made your breath catch, every inexplicable encounter, every number that wouldn't leave you alone, was your soul tapping your shoulder, saying, "Stay with me, I'm still here. You haven't lost the thread." The signs aren't magic. You are. They aren't the answer. They are the mirror, reflecting the part of you that already knows what to do next. So this is your invitation, to listen again, to feel again, to walk through your life, not as a skeptic, but as a seeker, not as a controller, but as a co-creator. Because the sacred is not far away, it's right here, in this moment, in this breath, in the next sign. You already know is coming. So trust, follow, let go of needing to understand, and simply remember, not who the world told you to be, but who you've always been. The signs are still speaking, and maybe, just maybe, you're always meant to hear them. So if this journey stirred something in you, if the signs in your life suddenly feel closer, clearer, more sacred than ever before, don't let the moment fade. This is not the end. This is a beginning. If you felt guided here, you were. So stay with us. Walk further, deeper, together. Subscribe to The Hidden Voyage if your soul is hungry for more truth, mystery, and memory, like this video. If the signs have ever found you, and share it with someone whose soul might be waiting for their next breadcrumb. And now, we want to hear from you. What was the most powerful synchronicity you've ever experienced? What did it awaken in you? What did it ask of you? Leave a comment below. Your story might be the sign someone else is waiting for. Because here, we don't just chase signs, we become them. This ... is The Hidden Voyage, and you were always meant to find your way home. Soul Whisper and Soul Creator. The Hidden Voyage. If this journey moves something in you, don't let it end in silence. Let it echo. Share it with someone still afraid to speak of death, still avoiding the mirror, still pretending time is infinite. Let this video be the hand you extend, the torch you pass, the doorway they didn't know they were seeking. Leave a comment, not just to speak, but to witness. What part of you is beginning to awaken? What have you been avoiding that now asks to be seen? And if your soul feels ready to keep walking, deeper, quieter, truer, then this is your place. Not just a channel, but a temple. Subscribe and join a circle of seekers who no longer run from the end because they've begun to live from it. We release these videos like offerings, each one a prayer, each one a mirror, each one a map to awaken before the end. to remember who you are beneath the name, to walk together toward what cannot die, one breath at a time, one truth at a time, one sacred step on the hidden voyage. Soul Whisperer and Soul Creator. The Hidden Voyage.